So we'll take you through the IL&FS default and the impact that it had on the money and debt markets in India. Before that, we'll just give you a brief overview of IL&FS and the call money market, the impact, walk you through how the crisis really unfolded, and the impact both from the demand and supply side on the call money markets in India. Now, IL&FS was a okay, yeah. So founded in 1987, it became a sprawling conglomerate before it went bust. They had basically two businesses. The holding company acted as the financier, and they had a lot of subsidiary companies which took on infrastructure project risks. So the holding company had both project and financial risks. They were extremely highly levered, and they had a negative ALM because they were using short-term funds in the form of commercial papers and debentures to fund really long gestation projects. Some of the projects we realized later on were also unviable, but despite the unviability of the projects, they had a lot of external support in terms of ratings agencies and the lack of strict regulations in ensuring that their activities are transparent and ensuring corporate governance really catapulted this disaster into much bigger than it what ideally should have been. Now, in the call money market, as you can see, on the issuer side, there is the urge to manage their liquidity, to meet short-term cash shortfalls, and to roll over short-term credit, especially in the NBFC segment. And on the investor side, there is the need to invest in short-term debt instruments, invest in safer instruments, and earn returns. And both of these players are assisted by bankers who match the issuers with the investors, ratings agencies who rate these instruments, and coverage analysts who help the investors understand how risky or not risky is the instrument. Now, over that 3 month period where this really panned out, we'll just take you through the brief highlights of how it happened. The first time any issues with IL&FS came out was when they missed payments to SIDBI of around 450 crores, and then this really catapulted, and they missed more and more payments. Then they experienced a ratings downgrade, and finally the company came out stating that they were facing liquidity crisis and they needed some both equity and debt investment in the company. Uh, the markets really panicked when DSP mutual funds sold DHFL commercial paper in the debt markets at very high yields, and that's when this really panic gripped through the entire call money market, and finally it ended in the government taking control of IL&FS, instituting a board and the Rotego. Now over to Kratik, he'll take you through how it impacted the call money markets.
Thank you, Ayush. Before coming to IL&FS and call money market, there are two major questions. So there are two major questions. First, where did the money come from? As in, why did commercial paper market actually become this much significant? Second, why is IL&FS so much important in that market? So it started way back after demonetization, wherein there was like a lot of fund flow in mutual funds, and they started tapping the commercial paper segment because they were offering higher yield. On the other hand, all the NBFCs, including IL&FS, were actually funding their long-term projects with their short-term liabilities because it was lucrative for them, and it eventually created a big problem called ALM, that is, your asset liability mismatch. Now, when it comes to IL&FS, their total outstanding borrowing was of 91,000 crores, out of which nearly 2%, of the total pie of commercial paper market, 2% was actually from IL&FS. And that is very evident from the exposure we have by the different companies over here. As in, whenever, the time this scam broke out and they defaulted, there was sudden flight to safety from commercial paper market to the overnight liquid overnight funds, which is evident from the bottom left graph that we have. So from August 18 to September 18, there was a sudden fall. So in terms of mutual funds exposure to IL&FS, we have listed out and we kind of analyzed the top mutual funds which had the maximum exposure to the company. Now, because of the total amount IL&FS, eventually companies had to, mark down their commercial paper, and it was nearly up to the limit, till the point of around 25%. In parallel, when DSP Mutual Fund actually short sell their DHFL NCDs, and the yields actually spiked up, and there was a bloodbath in the market, leading to two major things: one from the demand perspective, and other from the supply side perspective. From the impact of demand side, I think all the mutual funds actually panicked and they started taking out money from the CP market. Uh, because of that, that is evident from the top left graph. The net flows to the mutual fund actually started slowing down. The yield started to go up from 6.5 to 5%. from 2017 orders towards the early 2000, I mean early 2019. And if you see, the major reason for that has been the reduction in fund in the commercial paper market. So from 4.1 trillion INR to it fell to straight 3.5 million trillion INR. Uh, this had a structural impact on the supply side. So because there was no demand, the supply also started decreasing, which is evident from the top right graph that we have. So the number of CP issues which were up to the level of nearly 580 actually began to come down, and it fell till 141, that is 28,470 crores by September. Again, from the supply side, so what we did was we analyzed the balance sheet of the top NBFCs, and we wanted to study how has the funding mix actually changed. So since there was no demand into the market, it had a structural impact on the supply side as well, wherein the reliance on commercial paper has kind of faded away, and the same has been shifted to either long-term borrowing from the banks or to the external commercial borrowings. So that has been like one of the major significant structural changes in the market. If you analyze numbers of Piramal or probably India Bulls, so they have kind of shifted away from CP, or you can also say that they have been crafted or they have been perhaps driven out of the space. So that has been the overall structural impact. And the market which was once shining in, let's say, early 2018 actually started fading away. Now I would hand it over to Megha here.
Yeah. In the light of the IL&FS default, the RBI came up with a complete set of guidelines called the Liquidity Risk Framework for NBFCs. And on the sidelines, SEBI also introduced guidelines to make mutual funds safer. Just an overview of these RBI guidelines. These were, I mean, one of the first guidelines regulating NBFCs. So they came up with a comprehensive set on the liquidity coverage ratio. They introduced granularity in the maturity profiling, because earlier there was no granularity for debt issues which were with a maturity of less than 30 days. They came up with bucketing of 1 to 7 days, then 8 to 14 days, and then 15 to 30 days, and then again there were limits on how much the mismatch should be. There were also contingency funding plan and stress testing that every NBFC, I mean, had to do mandatorily. And also the government and they established internal risk tolerant limits pertaining to the business. Yeah, the SEBI. So these are some of the SEBI guidelines on MFs that were introduced by SEBI in June 2019, in which it became liquid funds had to mandatorily hold 20% assets in cash or other liquid securities. The sectoral limits to HFCs and any single sector were reduced. The exit loads were introduced on liquid funds to kind of dissuade institutional investors, and there were also security covers that were put in place. So basically, to conclude, every crisis, even especially every crisis brings to light the regulatory blind spots that kind of exist in the system and that need to be fixed for the proper functioning of the market as a whole. So we can say that this RBI's liquidity risk management framework for the NBFCs, it is a comprehensive regulatory framework that will definitely go a long way in fixing this prevailing regulatory blind spots in the NBFC sector, and it should eventually revive this NBFC, this sector which has been which has seen a sluggish growth recently. Also, these SEBI guidelines to make debt MF safer. And though we've seen a strain in the debt MF space recently with the Franklin Templeton saga, these changes from June 2019, coupled with the recent changes that have come in, these should increase transparency and security in the MF market. And overall, these measures are definitely in the right direction. So thank you.